Intuition is not a dirty word. It is an undefined one. Now, everybody uses that word, but we still don't have much of a framework for it. We say, trust your intuition, or I had a feeling, or something told me, but we rarely stop to ask what kind of signal we are actually talking about. There are 5 levels of intuition I want to walk through today. And I think this framework may change the way you understand your own inner signals. It is a missing map. And once you have a map, a lot of experiences that used to feel random or mystical or easy to dismiss start becoming easier to recognize. This is Wisdom versus Wallpaper. I'm Kevin Allen Kerber. Your intuition is at work every day. It helps you read rooms and sense patterns, catch tension, notice timing, and sometimes understand something before you can explain why. The trick is learning how to filter out the other inputs because fear has a voice, identity has a voice, the body has a voice, old conditioning, desire, exhaustion has a voice, your family has a voice, even when nobody from your family is in the room or even your zip code. So here's the map. 5 levels, a fast overview. There's pattern recognition, when your brain has been collecting clues behind your back. Somatic and relational intelligence, when your system reads a person or a room before language arrives. Emergent insight, when an answer drops in like a kick the door open. Expanded awareness, when the signal feels connected to spirit, ancestry, land, God, source, or something larger than your personal mind. And symbolic intuition, when dreams and images and synchronicities and strange phrases and charged little moments start acting like messengers. Those cosmic little moments that blow your mind a lot and are sometimes harder to just brush off. We're going to look at 5 of those, plus a current that runs through several of them, which we're going to call ancestral or lineage intuition. Because intuition is not one voice, it's a whole switchboard. And most people have been taking calls from it their whole lives without knowing which line was ringing. Trust your gut sounds useful, and sometimes it is. I would never want to take that away from someone who finally listened to a real signal after years of overriding themselves. But the phrase skips the harder part. A gut feeling can be insight. It could also be stress or hunger or old fear or social pressure, body memory, exhaustion, or the nervous system reacting to something familiar. Without a way to sort those signals, people swing between 2 extremes. One extreme dismisses intuition entirely. If it cannot be measured or explained, it gets treated like nonsense. That is far too narrow. Human beings pick up far more information than we can consciously name. A parent senses something is wrong before a child explains it. A nurse notices a patient changing before a chart makes it obvious. There's a real kind of knowing that arrives before explanation. The other extreme turns every inner movement into guidance. A strong emotion becomes truth. A coincidence becomes an instruction. A craving becomes a calling. That path gets messy fast because not every intense feeling deserves authority. The better question is not, do I trust my intuition? It's, what part of me is speaking right now? There are many parts of a person. One part wants safety, another wants approval, another wants to be right, another is just tired. There may be an old family rule speaking, or a professional identity protecting itself, or loneliness looking for a reason to text the wrong person. There may also be intuition. The problem is that all of those voices can use the same inner microphone. That is why trust your gut is incomplete. A phrase like that can be a doorway. It cannot be the whole house. What I want to give you is the house. So, level 1, The first level is the most grounded and probably the easiest to recognize once you know what to look for: pattern recognition. This is the level of intuition that should make even the most skeptical person lean in, because we're not starting with anything supernatural. We are starting with perception. Your conscious attention is limited. It can only hold so much at one time, but your system is taking in far more than the part of you that narrates the day can track. You notice tone, timing, posture, repetition, changes in behavior, missing details, the way someone answers too quickly or not quickly enough, the way a room feels different than it did 5 minutes ago, the way a person you know well seems normal on the surface, but some small part of their rhythm is off. And you may not consciously assemble that information to a report. Most of the time you don't. Instead, the result arrives first. Something is off, or I don't know where that is. I don't believe this answer, or feeling like I should check on them. That's pattern recognition. The mind has been gathering more than conscious thought can explain, and the signal reaches you before the explanation does. You stop looking for your keys, then suddenly know where they are. Not because a tiny angel of misplaced objects whispered in your ear, though that sounds cool. Some part of your memory still held trace of the movement. Parents know this level very well. When that child walks in the room and nothing obvious has happened, but something in the face or the voice or the silence doesn't match. Without knowing what the story is yet, they know something's up. Anyone with deep expertise knows this. A mechanic hearing something in the engine no one else would catch. That nurse, we said, seeing a patient turn before the chart catches it. That's not magic in the cheap sense. It's trained perception moving faster than verbal explanation. This is one reason intuition gets dismissed unfairly. The rational mind wants the explanation to arrive first, laid out in order, labeled and numbered, preferably wearing a clean shirt. But a lot of human knowing doesn't arrive that way. This does not mean the signal is always right. Pattern recognition can be distorted. If you have been hurt in a certain way, you may become very good at detecting anything that resembles the beginning of that hurt, even when the resemblance is thin. A person may think that they're reading the situation when they are actually reading the past. So we do not turn pattern recognition into a king. We treat it as information. Useful, often fast, often extremely accurate information, but still something to test. The practical move is to ask, what might I have noticed? Was the tone different? Did the body language contradict the words? Did my own body react to the pattern I have seen before? That kind of inquiry respects intuition without worshiping it. You start learning the difference between, I recognize this because I've seen it clearly, and I recognize this because I'm afraid it's going to happen again. This is where intuition becomes a skill instead of a vibe, because many of the moments people later describe as, I knew it, began here. They noticed something small. Then they talked themselves out of noticing it. A hairline crack is still a crack. Somatic and relational intelligence, right? Sometimes the body gets there first. Somatic and relational intelligence is the second level. And this is where most people have the most experience with intuition, even if they have never called it that. The body is not just carrying your head from room to room like a loyal animal. It's part of how you know the world. It responds to people. It responds to tone, responds to tension, distance, timing, safety, pressure, attraction, and threat. The body is reading constantly, and it does not wait for the verbal mind to finish its report. You know this feeling. You are in a conversation and the words sound fine, but your chest tightens. Or you agree to something and your mouth says yes before the rest of you gets a vote. You walk into a room and know immediately that the emotional weather has changed. That does not automatically mean someone is being dishonest or there is danger. Body signals need context too. A tight chest may be a relational warning, or it may be caffeine, lack of sleep, an old memory, or the fact that you've been holding your breath for half the afternoon. The body is intelligent, but it is not a courtroom stenographer. It gives signals, not final verdicts. Still, there are times when the body registers something the mind is trying very hard to avoid. This is especially true in relationships. A relationship can look fine from the outside, while the body keeps telling the truth in small ways. You become tired after every interaction. You brace before answering the phone. You feel relief when plans are canceled, then guilt because relief does not fit the story you're supposed to be telling yourself. That is information. Maybe the relationship needs repair. Maybe a boundary has been crossed so often that your body now recognizes the pattern faster than your mind can excuse it. A lot of people override body intelligence because they have been trained to value explanation more than sensation. If they cannot produce a clean reason, they don't give the signal any authority. But sometimes the body does not have a paragraph. It is pressure. It has a recoil. It has that strange feeling of space opening when something is right or space closing when something is wrong. If you ignore that long enough, the body gets louder. A quiet no longer becomes fatigue. A swallowed truth becomes tension. A repeated compromise becomes resentment that seems to come from nowhere, except it did not come from nowhere. It came from all the moments you heard the signal and kept moving. A body signal may only be asking you to pause, ask one better question, or stop agreeing before the rest of you is caught up. The body also recognizes alignment, not just warning. The conversation where your breathing settles. The idea that gives you energy instead of draining it. The project that makes you nervous in a clean way, not because it violates you, but because it asks you to grow. The body becomes part of the conversation, not the dictator, not the servant, a witness. And when the witness keeps showing up with the same information, it's worth listening. Level 3, emergent insight. Sometimes the signal is not primarily a pattern or a body sensation. Sometimes it is a thought that arrives whole, a sentence, a solution, a sudden understanding. That's the third level, emergent insight. The kind of intuition that gets described as coming out of the blue. You were not consciously building it, at least not in the obvious way, and suddenly there it is. This happens a lot in creative work, but it is not limited to creative work. You can be trying to solve a problem for days, getting nowhere. Then the answer shows up while you are doing something else entirely. You're walking the dog, taking the shower, doing some plain little tasks that gives the mind enough room to stop forcing the answer. The mind relaxes its grip, and something that was forming underneath finally has room to rise. It feels sudden, but it is not random. Your system has been working on the problem without your conscious attention hovering over it like a nervous supervisor. Pieces have been moving around quietly. Memories, observations, contradictions, unresolved questions. Then something clicks. The answer feels like it arrived all at once because the assembly happened out of view. This is why out of the blue is such an interesting phrase, because people use it to mean that there was no obvious cause. But often there was a cause. It was just not visible from the front office of the mind. The same is true of on a whim, A whim can sound unserious, almost childish, but some of the most important choices in life begin as a small impulse that does not yet have a formal explanation. Now, I know that starts to sound suspiciously like the beginning of a movie where someone either meets the love of their life or accidentally joins a cult in the desert. So we need to keep our shoes on here. A whim is not automatically wisdom, but it is not automatically nonsense either. So with emergent insight, the question is not, did this arrive suddenly? The better question is, what is the quality of the arrival? A useful insight often has a clean feeling to it. Not always comfortable, not always easy, but clean. It organizes something. It brings a little more coherence. It may reveal the next step without pretending to solve your whole existence by Tuesday afternoon. An impulse trying to escape discomfort has a different quality. It may feel urgent, inflated, slightly slippery. It wants to skip the conversation, skip the facts, skip the part where your adult life has to show up with pants on. Emergent insight also shows up in emotional understanding. You may have been circling a relationship issue for months, telling the same story in different ways. Then one day a simple realization arrives. I am not actually angry about this moment. I am angry because this moment keeps repeating. That kind of insight could be quiet, but it changes the room, changes the dynamic. And this is where intuition becomes uncomfortable because emergent insight often bypasses the careful identity you've been using to hold everything together. You may suddenly understand that the job you have been defending is draining you, that your confusion about a decision has been a way of avoiding the decision. Those are not tiny realizations. So the mind may rush in and try to make them smaller. It may say, that was just a random thought. Maybe it was. But random thoughts do not always keep returning with the same strange weight. Does the thought disappear the moment the mood changes? Or does it show up with quiet persistence? Obsession repeats because it is trying to control uncertainty. Insight returns because it still has something to show you. One feels like being chased around a locked room. The other feels like a note left on the table. Some insights arrive quickly because they have been forming for a long time. This is exactly what the Intuition Clarity Kit is built around. It's free at wisdomvswallpaper.com. Link is in the show notes. Now the conversation gets more delicate. Up to this point, even a skeptic can probably stay with us. Pattern recognition makes sense. Body intelligence makes sense. Emergent insight makes sense once you can accept that the mind can integrate below the surface and hand you a result before it hands you the math. But now we move into the kind of intuitive experiences people argue about, the ones that feel like they did not come from your personal thinking. Level 4 is transpersonal and expanded awareness. Someone thinks about a friend they have not spoken to in years, then 10 minutes later the phone rings. Someone feels pulled toward a place they have no practical reason to go, and something important happens there. Someone wakes from a dream with a certainty they cannot explain. You hear, I knew. I don't know how, but I just knew it. The goal here is not to prove every experience, and it's also not to dismiss every experience because it makes the rational mind uncomfortable. It is possible to take an experience seriously without becoming reckless with the interpretation. Transpersonal intuition refers to kinds of knowing that seem to reach beyond ordinary personal cognition. People describe it as God, spirit, source, prayer, field, collective consciousness, ancestors, guides, or a form of awareness that does not feel confined to the individual self. Different traditions use different language. We do not need to force everyone into the same vocabulary to have a useful conversation. What matters is the experience itself and how we relate to it. Did it make you more present, more honest? Did it help you to act with more care, courage, humility, or clarity? Or did it inflate you? Did it make you feel chosen in a way that separated you from everyone else? Did it let you avoid facts, consequences, relationships, or responsibility? Because expanded awareness, if it is real and useful, should probably expand more than your ego. It should expand your attention, your compassion, your ability to stay in contact with reality. So, a good question here is, what is the fruit of this knowing? Not how dramatic did it feel, not how strange was the timing. What does it produce? If it produces grounded action, deeper honesty, repair, compassion, a clearer relationship with reality, that is worth noticing. If it produces superiority, avoidance, dependence on signs, or a need to make every moment mean something, the experience may need a slower reading. People will say, the universe told me. Maybe. But maybe the universe sent a memo written partly by fear, partly by desire, and partly by the fact that you've not had lunch. I'm not here to say anything that mocks the mystical. I'm saying it because the mystical deserves better than sloppy interpretation. The stronger the experience, the more slowly I think it should be handled. Write it down. Sit with it. Check whether the interpretation holds up after sleep, food, time, and contact with reality. The signal may remain. The story you first attached to it may change. Before we move to the fifth level, there is a current that does not belong to any single level. It runs through several of them. A friend of mine recently used the phrase DNA intuition. She is a Native American, and she was talking about being deeply tuned into her people. I do not want to flatten her language or pretend I can define her experience from the outside, but the phrase stayed with me because it points toward a kind of knowing that our individualistic culture does not always know how to hold. Some intuition is not experienced as private. It is connected to people, ancestry, land, culture, memory, ceremony, story, grief, survival, belonging. It may show up as pattern recognition shaped by lineage. It may show up in the body when a song or language, a landscape, an elder's voice recognizes something before the mind explains why. It may show up symbolically through dreams, animals, recurring images, inherited stories. This matters because a lot of modern intuition talk has been stripped of relationship. It becomes my truth and my guidance and my alignment, my download, as if the self is floating in a private glass bubble with an unlimited spiritual data plan. Lineage intuition says something more complex. You are not only yourself, you are also shaped by people who came before you, by places that formed you, by wounds that were not fully spoken, by wisdom that may have survived without being written down. That does not mean every inherited impulse is sacred. Families and cultures can pass down brilliance and they can pass down fear. So again, discernment. But when that signal appears, the question is not only, what do I think? A better question may be, what am I connected to right now? That is a very different doorway. That doorway leads naturally into the fifth level because lineage often speaks in symbol. Dreams, animals, images, repeated phrases, charged memories. A place that keeps calling your attention. A song that arrives with strange timing. A story you thought you had forgotten that suddenly returns with heat on it. Symbolic And mythic intuition is the fifth level, and it may be the easiest one to dismiss too quickly or take too literally. Symbolic intuition is the kind of knowing that does not arrive as a clean sentence, it comes in sideways. The rational mind does not love this territory. It wants a memo, it wants a direct instruction. It wants the subject line to say, important message from your subconscious, please respond by Friday. But the symbolic mind is not a corporate department. It speaks in pictures. It speaks through association. It uses charge, repetition, timing, and emotional weight. This does not mean every symbol is a sign. That is where people get strange with it. A crow lands on a fence, and suddenly someone is planning a divorce, starting a candle company, or moving to Sedona with 2 suitcases and a rescue iguana. Maybe the crow is just a crow. But maybe it mattered because of what it stirred in you. That is the real doorway. The question is not always, what does this mean? A better first question is, why did this carry charge? Why did that image stay with you? Why did the dream feel different from the normal nonsense theater of sleep? Why did a certain phrase land in your body? Symbolic intuition often works by drawing attention to something the direct mind has been avoiding. A dream may not tell you what to do. It may show you the emotional shape of what you are living. This is where popular spiritual culture gets clumsy. It turns symbols into fixed little translation charts. Dreaming of water means this, seeing a hawk means that, finding a penny means the universe wants to buy you a webinar. But symbols do not work like vending machines. The meaning depends on the person, on the context, the timing, the emotional charge, and the life being lived around it. The symbol matters. The relationship to the symbol matters more. Mythic intuition belongs here too. Not just ancient stories, but the recognition that human experience often organizes itself around deep patterns, thresholds, initiations, returns, betrayals, the lost child, the false king, the monster at the gate. A person may be going through a transition and feel like their old life no longer fits, while the new one has not taken form. That is not just confusion. It may be a threshold experience. Naming it that way does not solve it, but it gives the experience dignity and shape. That is what symbolic and mythic intuition often does. It says, look here. It does not always say, do this. The more charged a symbol feels, the more gently I would handle it. Write it down, let it sit, see whether it makes you more honest or more theatrical. Don't just rush right out and get it tattooed. A good symbol does not have to flatter you. Sometimes it points towards grief you have been avoiding. Sometimes it gives you an image that is uncomfortable because the image is more honest than the story you have been telling. You do not have to become superstitious to take symbols seriously. You just have to stop treating imagination as meaningless. So those are the 5 levels and the current that moves through them. That is the map. But a map is only useful if it keeps us from walking straight into a swamp with confidence. Because once you start taking intuition seriously, there is a new problem. You can become too quick to baptize every inner movement as guidance. That is not discernment. That is just giving your impulses better lighting. So we have to talk about what impersonates intuition. Fear is one of the greatest impersonators. It comes with energy, it grabs the body, it builds a case fast. It often feels like certainty because it has removed all the softer options from the room. But fear has a particular texture. It wants immediate control. It rushes the timeline. Fear may be pointing to something that deserves attention. The mistake is letting fear write the entire interpretation. Desire impersonates intuition too, and desire is not the enemy. A life with no desire is not wisdom. it's anesthesia. But desire can make the evidence look better than it is. It can turn a small coincidence into a full endorsement, especially when something promises escape. Desire needs to be welcomed into the room without being allowed to run the meeting. Old wounds are trickier because they speak in the language of protection. A person who has been betrayed may sense betrayal everywhere. Someone who has been dismissed may hear disrespect before it's actually present. The system is not being dramatic. It's trying to prevent a repeat injury. The question is whether the present moment matches the old map or whether the wound rushed in with a conclusion before the current situation properly revealed itself. Urgency deserves special attention because a lot of people think intuition is always immediate. In ordinary life, urgency can become counterfeit clarity. It says, you must decide now, when the real discomfort is uncertainty. Urgency makes everything feel sacred because it makes everything feel scarce. Intuition may be timely. It may even be firm, but it usually does not need you to be terrorized into obedience. There are others worth naming. Shame borrows the tone of conscious while moving you toward hiding instead of repair. Spiritual bypass uses elevated language, surrender, trust, alignment to avoid the next honest step. And exhaustion is wildly underrated as a distortion. A depleted person can have thoughts that feel metaphysical because the body is just run out of fuel. If the signal is real, it will usually survive basic care. So the question is not, how do I become pure enough to hear intuition? The better question is, how do I become honest enough to recognize what else may be speaking? Which brings us to a simple practice. I call it the signal check. When something comes in, pause. Pause before you can explain it away, and pause before you obey it. That pause is the whole practice. The first question is what arrived first, not what you decided 5 minutes later. What was the first signal? A body sensation, a sudden thought, a pattern, a dream? You're just trying to catch the first arrival before the explanation covers it. The second question is, what happened in my body? Did the signal come with tightening, ease, pressure, relief, agitation, calm? The body does not get the final vote, but it belongs in the conversation. Third question is, what else could be speaking? Fear, desire, old family rule, exhaustion? A relationship dynamic where you already know what you are afraid to say? You are not interrogating yourself into paralysis. You are looking around the room. Fourth question, what would be a grounded way to test this? A signal does not always need a dramatic life change. Sometimes it just needs a note in your journal, a night of sleep, a direct question, or 24 hours without forcing an answer. Notice the first signal, check the body, identify what else may be speaking, find one grounded test. This framework wants to be seen on a page. The 5 levels need a map. The imposters need to be listed clearly. So I built companion materials for this episode, a free worksheet and the Intuition Clarity Kit. Go to wisdomvswallpaper.com, download the kit, use it, let me know how it goes. This framework is too useful to leave floating around as an idea. We are not trying to become people who float through life receiving perfect guidance from a golden intercom in the clouds. That sounds exhausting, also suspicious. The aim is more human than that. We are trying to become people who can listen with enough precision to know when a signal deserves attention. This is why intuition is not just a spiritual topic. It's a topic of inner authority. Who gets to speak inside you? Who gets believed? Which voices sound like wisdom only because they've been loud for a long time? A person who cannot recognize their own inner signal becomes very easy to manage from the outside, by slogans, by fear, by approval, by the algorithm, by anyone who could sound more certain than they feel. Intuition handled carefully brings some of that authority back home. And the next time a quiet signal appears, before the explanation, before the performance, before the part of you that wants to keep everything manageable takes over, you can pause just long enough to let it stay in the room. Because sometimes the thing you almost let yourself know is not trying to ruin your life. Sometimes it is trying to return you to it. This is Wisdom versus Wallpaper. I'm Kevin Allen Kerber. Hey, if this kind of work matters to you, subscribe wherever you listen and share this with someone who has ever said, I knew it, but I talked myself out of it.